What if everything you've been told about heroes was a lie? What if the bedtime stories, the comic books, the movies, the speeches, all of it were carefully crafted illusions to keep you obedient, to keep you small, to keep you waiting for someone else to save you? Heroes are paraded before us as symbols of virtue. They shine bright, they smile wide, they bask in applause. But behind the curtain, it is always the villain who writes history. Heroes beg for applause, villains build empires, and the truth is brutal. The world does not reward applause, it rewards power. Think about it. The hero waits for permission. The hero hesitates, second guesses, looks over their shoulder for approval. The hero is bound by rules, by morality, by the fragile need to be loved. But the villain moves in silence. The villain takes what others are too afraid to claim. The villain does not ask, does not beg, does not wait. The villain acts. And in a world that punishes hesitation, action is the only thing that matters. Every empire you've ever studied, every dynasty that carved its name into stone, every revolutionary who bent the world to their will, they were not called heroes in their time. They were called monsters, tyrants, villains. They were hated, feared, despised, and yet they endured, they conquered, they won, because they understood something the hero never could. Applause fades, but power lasts. The crowd cheers for the hero today and forgets them tomorrow. But the villain, the one who dares to embrace the darkness, leaves scars on the world that cannot be erased. The villain is remembered not because they were loved, but because they were undeniable. And that is the secret no one wants to tell you. The world does not belong to the good. It belongs to the relentless. Heroes are fragile. They are built on the approval of others, and when that approval is stripped away, they crumble. But villains are forged in rejection. They are born in the shadows, in the silence of being ignored, in the pain of being cast aside. They take that pain, that humiliation, and they sharpen it into a weapon. They turn wounds into armor. They turn scars into crowns. And when they rise with a fire that no applause could ever ignite. Picture it. A child overlooked, mocked, dismissed. A dreamer told they will never make it. A fighter told they are too weak. A thinker told their ideas are dangerous. That child grows up in silence, in shadows, in pain. And while the world laughs, while the world applauds the safe and the ordinary, that child is building something else. A hunger, a rage, a vision. And when the time comes, when the mask drops, the world is forced to face the monster it created. That is the birth of a villain. And here's the truth no one wants to admit. Villains are not born evil. They are born ordinary. They are made extraordinary by the cruelty of others. Every rejection, every betrayal, every humiliation is a brick in the empire they will one day build. Heroes are handed their stage. Villains build their throne from the rubble of their suffering. So ask yourself, who truly wins? The hero who is loved for a moment, or the villain who is feared for eternity? The hero who bends to the will of the crowd, or the villain who bends the world to their own? The answer is written in every page of history. The answer is carved into every empire that still casts its shadow over us. The villains always win. And yet, we are told to worship the hero. We are told to clap for the one who saves the day, who sacrifices, who smiles for the cameras. But what happens when the cameras turn off? What happens when the applause fades? The hero is forgotten. The villain remains. The villain's name is whispered in fear, in awe, in hatred, but it is remembered. History does not remember the good. It remembers the relentless. It remembers the ruthless. It remembers the ones who refuse to bow, refuse to beg, refuse to wait. And that is why villains always win. Because villains understand something heroes never will. The world is not fair. The world does not care about your goodness, your kindness, your virtue. The world bows to power. And power belongs to those willing to take it. So when you look at the world, when you see the empires that stand, the names etched into stone, the legacies that echo through centuries, ask yourself, were they heroes or were they villains who refused to die? The answer is clear. The villains always win. History is not a story of heroes. It is a graveyard of villains who refuse to die. Think of every empire that ever rose. Rome was not built by saints. It was carved by men who slaughtered, conquered, enslaved, and burned. Julius Caesar was not hailed as a hero in his time. He was called a tyrant, a usurper, a man who dared to crown himself above the Senate. His enemies painted him as a villain, and in their eyes he was. But centuries later, his name is etched into eternity. The men who called him a villain are forgotten. Caesar remains. Napoleon Bonaparte. To the crowned heads of Europe, he was a monster. A short Corsican upstart who dared to defy kings and emperors, who dared to rewrite the map of Europe with his own hand. They called him the Antichrist, the scourge of nations. And yet, when the smoke cleared, it was Napoleon's vision of law, order, and merit that reshaped the continent. The kings who cursed him are dust. His name still burns. Genghis Khan. To the civilized world, he was a barbarian, a savage, a demon on horseback. His enemies called him the destroyer of worlds. And yet he built the largest contiguous empire in human history. He united tribes that had slaughtered each other for centuries and forged them into a force that bent half the world to its knees. To his enemies, he was a villain. To his people, he was the father of a nation. To history, he is eternal. Do you see the pattern? The world always calls its conquerors villains. The world always spits on those who refuse to bow. But when the dust settles, when the centuries pass, it is their names that remain. Not the names of the heroes who opposed them, not the names of the crowds who booed them. Only the villains endure. Even outside the battlefield, the story is the same. Look at the inventors, the thinkers, the creators who reshaped the world. Galileo was branded a heretic, a villain against God's order because he dared to say the earth was not the center of the universe. They silenced him, imprisoned him, tried to erase him. But the truth he carried could not be buried. Today, his name is carved into the foundation of science. The men who condemned him are forgotten. Nikola Tesla, mocked, ridiculed, dismissed as a madman. His rivals painted him as unstable, dangerous, a villain to progress. Yet the world we live in hums with his vision. Electricity, wireless communication, the very lifeblood of modern civilization, all born from the mind of the man they tried to bury. Every empire, every revolution, every breakthrough was built by someone the world first called a villain. And that is the truth no one wants to face. Villains are not the exception. They are the rule. Because villains understand what heroes never will. Heroes wait for applause. Villains move in silence. Heroes bend to the crowd. Villains bend the world. Heroes are remembered in stories. Villains are remembered in stone. And here is the paradox. The very people who curse the villain in their time are the ones who later worship their legacy. The same Rome that stabbed Caesar in the Senate built statues of him a century later. The same Europe that cursed Napoleon studied his laws and copied his reforms. The same world that feared Genghis Khan now traces its bloodlines, its trade routes, its very DNA back to him. The villain always wins because the villain does not fight for applause. The villain fights for permanence, and permanence is all that matters. The villain's greatest weapon is not the sword, not the army, not the empire. It is the mind. Heroes are trained to seek applause. They are conditioned to crave validation. They are addicted to the sound of clapping hands, to the comfort of approval. But villains are forged in silence. They are born in rejection. They are raised in the shadows where no applause exists. And in that silence, they learn something the hero never will: how to turn pain into power. Every villain begins as someone broken, someone overlooked, someone told they were not enough. That rejection becomes fuel, that humiliation becomes fire. Where the hero collapses under the weight of criticism, the villain sharpens it into a blade. Where the hero begs for love, the villain learns to thrive without it. Obsession, that is the heartbeat of the villain. While the hero is distracted by applause, by reputation, by the fragile need to be liked, the villain is consumed by a single vision. They see the world not as it is, but as it should be. And they will burn everything in their path to make it real. Obsession is not weakness. Obsession is clarity. It is the refusal to be ordinary. It is the refusal to accept limits. Heroes are fragile because they are divided. They want to win, but they also want to be loved. They want to conquer, but they also want to be admired. That split is their downfall. The villain has no such division. The villain does not care if they are loved. The villain does not care if they are hated. The villain only cares if they win. And that is why they always do. Resilience. That is the armor of the villain. Heroes are celebrated when they succeed, but when they fail, the crowd abandons them. The applause dies, the love disappears, and the hero is left hollow. But the villain expects betrayal. The villain expects rejection. The villain expects the world to spit in their face. And so, when it happens, they do not break. They grow sharper, stronger, more relentless. The villain does not collapse under the weight of failure. They rise from it. They weaponize it. Every scar becomes a lesson. Every wound becomes a map. Every betrayal becomes a reminder. Trust no one. Depend on no one. Bow to no one. That is why villains are unstoppable, because nothing the world throws at them can surprise them. They have already lived through the worst. They have already been broken, and once you have been broken, you cannot be broken again. Heroes are defined by their victories, villains are defined by their scars, and scars last longer than applause. The villain thrives in shadows. While the hero shines in the spotlight, the villain moves in silence. While the hero is distracted by the crowd, the villain is building in the dark. The villain does not need recognition. The villain does not need validation. The villain only needs time. And when the time comes, when the mask drops, the world is forced to face what has been growing in the shadows all along. That is the secret of the villain's mindset. Patience. Heroes rush to be loved. Villains wait to be undeniable. Think of the seed buried in the soil, in darkness, in silence, invisible, forgotten. The world does not clap for the seed. The world does not cheer for its struggle, but beneath the soil it is growing, it is breaking, it is clawing its way upward. And when it finally breaks the surface, when it finally blooms, the world has no choice but to see it. That is the villain, buried, ignored, mocked, until the day they rise and the world cannot look away. The villain's mind is a fortress, built from rejection, reinforced by obsession, guarded by scars, and inside that fortress burns a fire that no applause could ever ignite. That is why villains always win, because they are not distracted by love. They are not weakened by applause. They are not broken by rejection. They are sharpened by it. And when the hero hesitates, the villain strikes. When the hero doubts, the villain decides. When the hero waits for permission, the villain takes the crown. The villain's mindset is not about evil. It is about clarity. It is about the refusal to bow to the fragile illusions of morality and applause. It is about seeing the world as it truly is, ruthless, unforgiving, merciless, and in that world only the ruthless survive. That is why villains always win. Victory is never free. Every crown is heavy. Every empire is built not only on triumph but on sacrifice. And this is where the truth cuts deepest. Villains always win, but they never win without paying a price. The hero's story ends with applause. The curtain falls, the crowd cheers, and the hero basks in the glow of love. But the villain's story does not end. The villain does not get applause. The villain gets silence, isolation, fear. The villain wins the crown, but the crown is cold. Because to rise above the world, you must leave the world behind. To seize power, you must sacrifice comfort. To build an empire, you must accept loneliness. Heroes are surrounded by love, but love is fragile. Villains are surrounded by fear, and fear endures. Think of Alexander the Great. He conquered the known world before the age of 30. To his enemies, he was a villain, a destroyer, a tyrant. To his soldiers, he was a god. But in the end, he died alone, poisoned by the very ambition that made him immortal. His empire fractured, his name eternal, but his life consumed. That is the cost of victory. Think of Genghis Khan. He united tribes that had slaughtered each other for centuries. He built an empire that stretched from the Pacific to the Caspian, but he lived in constant war, constant blood, constant struggle. His victories were endless, but so were his battles. That is the cost of victory. The villain wins, but the villain pays. Always. Because to embrace the villain's path is to embrace solitude. The crowd will never love you. The world will never cheer for you. You will be feared, hated, cursed. And yet, you will endure. Because the villain does not need love. The villain does not need applause. The villain only needs victory. But victory is lonely. The throne is cold. The empire is silent. And that silence is the price of power. Heroes live for the crowd. Villains live for the crown. And the crown is heavy. This is the paradox of the villain's triumph. They win, but they win alone. They rise, but they rise in shadows. They conquer, but they conquer at the cost of peace. And yet, they accept that cost, because to them, the price of victory is worth more than the comfort of applause. The villain's life is a war without end. Every day is a battle. Every night is a struggle. The world will never stop resisting them. The world will never stop cursing them. But the villain does not care. Because the villain does not fight for peace. The villain fights for permanence, and permanence is worth any price. So yes, villains always win, but they win with scars, they win with blood, they win with loneliness, they win with the weight of the crown pressing down on their shoulders. And yet they would choose it again, because to the villain, the cost of victory is nothing compared to the cost of being forgotten. Heroes are loved, then forgotten. Villains are hated, but remembered. And in the end, memory is the only immortality that matters. That is why villains always win. Not because they are spared from pain, but because they are willing to endure it. Not because they are free from sacrifice, but because they are willing to pay it. Not because they are stronger, but because they are relentless. The villain's crown is heavy. The villain's throne is cold. The villain's empire is built on blood. But the villain endures. And that endurance is victory. So here we are. The end of the story. The end of the illusion. The end of the lie that heroes always win. You've seen the truth now. You've seen the pattern written across centuries, carved into stone, whispered through bloodlines. Heroes are remembered in stories. Villains are remembered in history. Heroes live for applause. Villains live for permanence. Heroes want to be loved. Villains want to be undeniable. Heroes bend to the crowd. Villains bend the world. And when the dust settles, when the centuries pass, when the applause has long since faded into silence, it is the villain's name that remains. But here is the question that matters most. What about you? Because this is not just history. This is not just myth. This is not just a story about Caesar or Napoleon or Khan or Tesla. This is about you, your life, your struggle, your pain, your scars. You have been told to wait. You have been told to be good. You have been told to play by the rules, to smile for the crowd, to beg for applause. And where has it gotten you? Forgotten, overlooked, ignored. The truth is simple. If you want to rise, if you want to endure, if you want to carve your name into eternity, you cannot live like a hero. You cannot wait for permission. You cannot beg for love. You must be willing to be called a villain, because the villain is not evil. The villain is necessary. The villain is the one who dares to do what the hero will not. The villain is the one who dares to embrace the darkness everyone else runs from. The villain is the one who dares to take the crown, no matter the cost. And yes, the cost is heavy. The throne is cold. The crown is sharp. The empire is built on blood. But what is the alternative? To live forgotten, to die applauded but erased, to be loved for a moment and then discarded by history. Number. That is not enough. That will never be enough. The villain understands that immortality is not found in applause. It is found in scars. It is found in the empire you build, in the mark you leave, in the shadow you cast. The villain understands that to be remembered, you must be willing to be hated, to be feared, to be cursed, and so the choice is yours. You can live as a hero, safe, loved, applauded, and forgotten, or you can rise as a villain, feared, hated, cursed, and eternal. Because villains build empires while heroes beg for applause, and in the end, the world does not belong to the good. It belongs to the relentless. So I ask you now, not as a storyteller, not as a voice in the dark, but as a mirror held up to your soul. Are you willing to be called a villain? Are you willing to embrace the shadows? Are you willing to pay the price? Because if you are, then the crown is waiting. The throne is waiting. The empire is waiting. And history is waiting for your name.